Could I interest you in buying me a cup of chicken gumbo?
Holy damn crap. Is that you, Steve?
Yes. It most certainly is fancy seeing you here. In the cafeteria of a deep underground military base.
I know. When I got the text message informing me that the world would be ending momentarily, and that I needed to evacuate immediately, I figured that the deep underground military base would only be full of important people, like soldiers, politicians, and celebrities.
And it is. I still haven't figured out why in the hell they would want me to be one of the people to perpetuate the human race though.
Well, I suppose that Bill Clinton and Bono still need floor sweepers. Even after the apocalypse.
So true. I ran into Paul McCartney down here the other day.
Are you sure that it was the original James Paul McCartney? After all, it could have been William Jr. Campbell or Billy Shears.
Wait. Are you telling me that there's more than one Paul McCartney?
Oh yes. Some people think that the real James Paul McCartney died in late 1966, and that he was replaced with a look-alike.
But that's completely batshit crazy insane. How could one of the most talented and recognizable people who ever lived have been replaced without everyone knowing about it?
Don't be a sucker. That is exactly what they want you to think.
They? Who in the freaking hell are they? What the hell are you talking about? You can't just replace the greatest songwriter in the history of the world a few weeks before they started recording their most important album, Sgt. Pepper.
But Sgt. Pepper is a clue in itself.
Shut up for a second. You're standing there, telling me that the person who wrote and sang Penny Lane isn't the same person who wrote and sang Eleanor Rigby? That's what you're telling me. I have that part right?
Well, like I said, some people think that the original died in late 1966. Others think that he never died. They think that he was only temporarily replaced from Sgt. Pepper through the Magical Mystery Tour. Others are certain that he wasn't physically replaced, but that he just had his soul swapped with Aleister Crowley's.
Aleister Crowley? You mean the guy from the Ozzy Osbourne song, Mr. Crowley? The guy who called himself the Beast 666. That Aleister Crowley.
Well, I didn't say that I believed it, but there's a lot of symbolic stuff in Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising pointing to the possibility that Paul underwent a death and rebirth ritual in order to become Crowley.
But why the fuck would the fool on the hill want to become Aleister Crowley?
Well, I'm actually kind of glad that you brought that up. The fool is one of the...
It's one of the cards in a tarot deck. Right. But what in the world of stinking Christ does that have to do with the Beatles?
Let's take a step back for a second.
A step back? You're standing there, 3 feet away from me, with a stray goddamn face, trying to sell me a stinking diaper full of decomposing puppies, and you want me to take a fucking step back.
I know this whole thing sounds a little bit nutty, but I'm certain you'll begin to see the light if you'd just listen to Revolution 9 backwards.
Why? Does it say Paul McCartney may have died between Revolver and Sgt. Pepper, or that maybe he became Aleister fucking Crowley?
Of course it doesn't say that. Don't be ridiculous. What it does say is Turn Me On Dead Man, which is a reference to the Sgt. Pepper song called A Day in the Life, which either about the automobile crash that killed Paul, the car crash that killed his friend Tara Brown, or the car crash that killed Brian Jones.
Brian freaking Jones? You mean the fat beach boy who went insane?
No. That's Brian Wilson.
Oh right. Sorry about that.
No, Brian Jones was the founder of the Rolling Stones. You see, when Tara Brown supposedly crashed his sports car, Brian Jones's future girlfriend Suki Poti was in the car, but wasn't even scratched.
So fucking what?
Well, after Tara Brown's death, Suki just happened to move in with Brian Jones.
Wait. I think I know where you're heading with this.
Give it a shot, boss man.
You're suggesting that Brian Jones was murdered in Tara Brown's car, in order to make it appear as if Tara died, and that Tara took Brian's place in the Rolling Stones, and kept Suki as his girlfriend. You know what? This actually explains why Brian Jones, who was supposedly a musical genius, began to take such a minor role in the band, before being found dead in his pool. Of course. The body in Brian's pool was actually Tara Brown, because the real Brian Jones was killed in Tara's car.
Yes. Or no, actually. What if Paul was pretending to be Tara that day and he's the one who died in the car crash?
Right. Because he wanted to be Aleister Crowley?
No. I don't think that Aleister Crowley fits into this scenario.
So why in the name of He Who Walks Behind the Rose would Paul McCartney have been driving Tara Brown's car that day?
Because he was fucking Tara's girlfriend.
So who died in Brian Jones's pool?
I'm sorry to say this, but it was probably just Brian Jones.
So who did I meet the other day then?
Well, clearly, it was either James Paul McCartney, William Jr. Campbell, Billy Shears, Brian Jones, Tara Brown, or possibly Denny Lane.
Denny Lane? I think I'm going to need more than a cup of chicken gumbo for this.
Can I buy you a drink, sailor?
I thought you'd never ask. So, where the Christ were we? You were trying to convince me that the original James Paul McCartney either died in late 1966 and was replaced permanently, or he was temporarily replaced, or that he underwent some completely impractical death and rebirth ritual in order to become Aleister Crowley, better known as the Beast 666.
Well, at the very least, somebody died in Tara Brown's sports car on December 18, 1966. It was either Tara Brown, Brian Jones, or James Paul McCartney.
Right. But surely those three people don't look anything alike.
One would think so, but one would be wrong. According to certain photographs, Tara and Brian Jones actually looked remarkably similar. And strangely enough, in other photos of Tara, he looks quite a lot like Paul, or Fall, as we've come to call the replacement. You know. Fall, with an F, like a fake Paul.
But how can one man look like a shaggy-haired blonde, and also like a brown-haired beetle?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't have a very good answer. Perhaps Tara was able to use his power and money as the heir to the Guinness family fortune to plant fake photographs in the newspapers. Or, it's possible that the Beatles, or Rolling Stones' fortunes were utilized in a similar way. It's also possible that the Tavistock Institute, or the British Secret Service was behind the whole thing, in order to keep their culture-influencing cash cow from grinding to a halt.
Wait, what the hell is the Tavistock Institute?
The Tavistock Institute is a shadowy British organization that some people believe is behind every social, political, and cultural movement for the past 50 years.
This reminds me of the scene in A Hard Day's Night, where George stumbles into a room with a man who attempts to gauge his response to a new fashion trend that he plans to foist upon the public via a young female television star.
Exactly.
And when George shows himself to be an independent thinker who won't be swayed, the man says you can be replaced, chickie baby.
Now you're thinking. I believe that this man represents the hidden hand of Tavistock, controlling popular culture, and perhaps even the Beatles.
Sweet fancy Moses. Are you saying that somebody knew, all the way back in 1964, that the original James Paul McCartney was going to be replaced, and that they were dropping in A Hard Day's Night?
Maybe. Not only that, Steve, but the death and rebirth ritual was foreshadowed in the lad's second feature film Help. There are several scenes in Help that would later be echoed in Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising, and all of these scenes have to do with ritual sacrifice.
Yes, you mentioned this before, but who in the sweet Christing fuck is Kenneth Anger?
Well, for a start, he went to dancing school with Judy Garland and Shirley Temple.
Holy crap. Even I know that The Wizard of Oz is full of MK Ultra mind control shit, not to mention the fact that the first half of the movie syncs up with Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Not only that, but you'll never guess who was in Abbey Road Studios recording their album at the same time that the Beatles were recording Sgt. Pepper, their first album with the replacement Paul.
Well, 20 minutes ago I never would have guessed, but now I'll take a wild stab in the dark and say that it was Pink freaking Floyd.
Yes. And this also happens to be the time period where a certain Mr. Sid Barrett lost his fucking shit and decided that it would be a great idea to live the rest of his life in his parents' goddamn basement. But let's get back to Kenneth Anger for a minute. Like I said, he attended dancing school with Judy Garland and Shirley Temple. The Beatles wanted to include Judy on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, but they couldn't get legal clearance for it. On the other hand, Shirley Temple appears on the cover 3 times.
It's been a while since I've had a look at the cover of Sgt. Pepper, but I'm pretty sure that one of the Shirley Temples is represented as a doll sitting on a chair, and she's wearing a sweater that says "Welcome the Rolling Stones."
Bob's your uncle. But beyond that, there's also a white sports car driving up her leg.
Shit. This is just too easy. Next you're going to tell me that Tara's sports car was white.
No need to tell you that now, Steve, but yes. The car that Tara, or Brian Jones, or James Paul McCartney crashed on December 18, 1966 was a white Lotus Elan.
More calling Orson.
I know this is animal fucking crackers, but there's more to our Kenneth Anger story, and goddamn me to a life in a deep underground military base, if it doesn't include everyone's favorite singer-songwriter Charles Manson. But here's a little more background on Anger. He had a strange fascination with the occult, and became infatuated with our old friend Aleister Crowley.
Of course he did.
In 1955, Anger made a documentary about Crowley's Thelema Abbey. Oh, and while I'm thinking about it, guess who else appears on the cover of Sgt. Pepper?
Mr. Crowley?
Spot on, Steve. Anyway, in the late 60s, Anger became friends with musicians such as the Rolling Stones, and Bobby Beausoleil, who Anger cast as Lucifer in his film called Lucifer Rising.
The one with all of the death and rebirth symbolism similar to the Beatles' film Help.
The one and only. In addition to this though, Beausoleil was also a member of Charles Manson's family, until he was arrested for murdering Gary Hinman a couple of weeks before some of the other Manson family members committed the Tate LaBianca murders. I'm afraid we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves though. For now, it's just important that you understand the connections between the Beatles, Tara Brown, the Rolling Stones, Kenneth Anger, Bobby Beausoleil, Charles Manson, and Sharon Tate.
Fine. I don't think I'm drunk enough to take this any further at the moment anyway.
You can certainly say that shit again.